responding to some of your questions, but if other people want to respond to questions, we can do that. So the floor is open, and there's already a question from Ning. So while we formulate, we could listen to Ning and maybe go ahead.
我说中文，张雷帮我翻译一下吧。那个，我应该说，我一见着孟京辉，我就老想着看他第一次话剧的经验，那是92年年底冬天，在中戏的一个说剧院还不说是一个小教室里挤满了人，然后那真是就是可以说是穷戏剧，什么都没有，就人就是戏剧本身，在那看那个思凡的那次经历啊。
I still remember the first time I saw Meng Jinghui's play. It was as early as in 1992. In a cold winter day, I went to the Central Academy of Dramatic Art. It was rather not a theater house, but rather a classroom. It was packed, and I think it was poor theater in the real sense. It was just nothing but theater, but the play.
但是我记得就是说，当时看的人大概都是一小撮中国的高级知识分子，真是知识分子精英，年轻的都挤在那屋子里在那看。
I think the audience was basically the intellectual elite, the very select few, just packed into this small space.
然后所有的人立即就被这种完全是全新的、完全不同于中国以往戏剧的风格和他所感染的一种巨大的快乐感染了。
And everybody was just immediately drawn into it and influenced by this something they had never seen before in China.
我记得从那开始，孟京辉这个名字几乎就成了这个北京知识分子或者北京这个非常先锋的一个人群的一个标志性的一个事件发生的一个怎么说呢？一个寄居点。只要孟京辉出一个剧，我们都会赶去看，只要我们在北京。
And I think starting from that moment, the name Meng Jinghui became a brand name or a flagship associated with the term pioneering, or if there's anything he does, we all go there and see it and immediately.
这个现象一直发展到今天，就是说，已经人群越来越扩大，变成了一个不仅是知识分子圈，不仅是那些就是年轻的知识分子，而且包括了很多这个扩大了很多观众，包括他们得到了很多商业方面的成功。
And now this group has apparently gotten bigger from a select few of young intellectuals to a much bigger crowd and of young people, and along with it came commercial success.
我昨天再看到那个廖一梅放片段的时候，它引起了我对每一场当时身临其境的一些亲身的感受，所以我特别想就他的戏剧风格说几个我自己的感受啊。
And watching those chapters last night just immediately brought back memories. So I would like to make a few comments on the dramatic style of theirs.
这个我当然也之后想听孟京辉自己跟廖一梅讲一讲他们这个戏剧创作，但是我先就是很主观的说我自己的感受哈。
Of course, I would really like to hear what they got to say about it, but first I would like to share my personal view as well.
我觉得首先哈，他们戏剧里有一种就是一些细节方面，就是肢体语言的运用是在中国以往戏剧从来没有发生过的。他们就是通过肢体语言和控制这个舞台上的这种表演的节奏，然后用一种非常非常自由的方式来解放中国戏剧的那种很俗套、很沉重的窠臼。就说他们可以用，比方说多媒体，用一种很即兴的，完全非常个性化的，甚至可以叫一种舞蹈。就是很现代的一种舞蹈，然后呢，通过一种对 语言本身的那种，就是像廖一梅说那种爆炸式的堆砌，而这种堆砌把它已经完全超出了北京方言的那个传统的那个东西，它完全有一种自己新的创新。因为这种东西在中国戏剧也好，电影也好，都是非常少见、非常难得的一些品质啊。
First of all, I want to comment on their great attention to detail in terms of the use of the body language, which has never been done before, because they really control the stage with a lot of freestyle movement, and which is quite refreshing when you look at the stiff and old-fashioned tradition of the Chinese drama. So there's a lot of improvisation. It's almost like dancing, and the use of language, not just the colloquial, the local slangs, but just a explosive piling of language on each other, which is really innovative and rarely seen in China.
We really have to move on a bit, okay? So,
Okay, I try to be short. 所以刚才廖一梅说到那个，他对这种就大家笑的感觉，其实我体会很深，就是我觉得看完孟京辉的戏以后，常常有一种因为思想交流和找到思想共鸣的快感。也就是说，通过他的很创新的、很先锋的戏剧形式，传达出这种快感，所以常常会在剧院里有这种很强烈的反应。
Just now, Yimei mentioned the laughter in the theater. I think it really comes from the joy of being capable to exchange intellectually. I think part of that laughter came from that feeling.
所以我我特别想听听，就是说孟京辉哈，他怎么样在每一出戏，就是这个找到自己的风格，因为他的风格实际上是变化很大的，每戏跟戏之间。同时呢，我也好奇廖一梅刚才说那个对语言的不信任感，我特别想听听你这个关于这个话题啊。
So I basically have two questions. One is for Meng Jinghui on how he managed to be so versatile in different plays, to have different styles, and the other one is for Yimei. She mentioned her distrust with language. I would really want to hear her getting into a little more detail on that.
我们在创作那个戏剧的时候，其实不是先从主题出发的，也不是先从一个戏的意义出发的。我们的出发点往往在，比如我在做一个戏的。最初的出发点就是源于一个对一种形式的热爱。
When I start something, I don't start from themes or significance. Rather, it all comes from my fascination of a certain style.
我们做过特别象征主义的这种作品，做过特别写实的。做过一些社会批判的作品，也做过一些比较摇滚风格的东西，但是所有的到头来全都实际上是我们的发展中的一种风格。
We have done different styles because we've done things from symbolism all the way to realism or social criticism to the punkish style, rock and roll. These are all styles in progress and in development.
也就是说，风格的探索、形式的探索，一直是我们在创作的刚开始和过程当中特别坚持的东西。到现在为止，我们也没有一种固定的风格。
The exploration of style, of form, has always been something we have insisted on, and we have never been fixed under a certain form or style.
可能没有固定的风格，可能正是我们的一个很有效的一个方法。
I think no fixed style is probably one of the effective ways we have operated.
这样，观众、批评家、政府都抓不住我们。
In that way, we become very slick, and no viewers or critics or government can have a very their strong grip on us and really know.
所以我们可以自由的在这个创作里边跑来跑去、窜来窜去，想做什么就可以做一些我们愿意做的事儿。这也是我们戏剧这方面比较幸运的一个现实。
In that way, we can freely go about doing whatever we want and get away with it. I think that's part of the reality here.
我来补充一点这个特别有意思等一等，我想就这一点I want to add a footnote to what Meng Jinghui just said. The interest in or the focus on the form or even the design in China could be a good way to bypass the censorship, bypass the government attention. And that's why he has been lucky that he explores lots of issues that could have been caught by the government if it were more straightforward about the themes. But so far, he's been lucky. Though the government hasn't particularly liked their themes, but they haven't banned any. 你的戏好像从来没有被禁过吧？
也被禁过。
哪一个？
有一个我爱叉叉，还有阿 Q 同志。
Relatively very few. His plays have been popular, not because it's always eulogistic of the regime, because it looks like the focus is on the style, on the form. Then the government think it's safe. I think this is a very important point. Okay, Yimei.
这个语言的问题要说起来太长了，就是咱们可以慢慢再交流。但是我就记得博尔赫斯晚年的时候说过一句话：任何作家都不相信语言，就是这样东西被你天天跟他打交道，反复的使用，你深知它的力量，这时候你会对它产生怀疑，它会有时候我用一个最简单的通常的说法，有时候你会因为漂亮忘了意义，就是或者是为了某种意义丧失了漂亮，这个中间是一个特别微妙的关系，它跟你的表达之间到底有多大的缝隙，就是只有每天跟语言打交道的人才能深刻的体会，所以这个不信任感可能是任何一个用语言作为他的表达工具的人的内心感受。
In terms of language, I think it's a long story. We can talk about it later. But basically, as some writer once said, no writer trusts the language because sometimes you may be sacrificing beauty for the significance, and other times sacrificing significance with beauty. And this feeling it's always existing for someone who's working with language on a day-to-day basis.
就是你深知一样东西的力量的时候，你就会怀疑它，就是对很多事情都是这样。
Once you know the power of something, you will get suspicious of this thing, and this is true for a lot of things on top of language itself.
不好意思，我也用中文提一下。这个我因为自己植根于这个当代视觉艺术，就想提一个关于这个戏剧生态的有一点那种跨门类研究的那种问题。我们艺术圈往往说这个现在就突然画廊多了，美术馆多了，这个圈子繁荣了。但是就失去的就是一种统一的叙事的一种感觉，就是 你做一个什么作品或者是办一个什么展览，它就没有一个那种可以读的一种语境，就是往往是这种机会多了，或者是这个系统越发达，就是怎么给这个单一的一件作品或者是一场戏，在一个大语境里面定下一个意义，或者是它有一个什么样的这个在整个这个戏剧史有一个什么样的位置？我不知道你们，我就很好奇你们是不是也在面临这么一个问题？Yeah, sure. I'm curious because a thing we keep coming back to kind of in the visual arts circle is like as the system expands and as there are more and more museums and galleries, the meaning of a specific work or a specific exhibition is much harder to pinpoint. There's like the lack of a kind of unified narrative that everything sort of fits into. And I just, as we sort of look at different avant-garde trajectories in China, you know, in the last 30 years and kind of the paths they're taking now, I'm just curious if that's something that's faced also in the theater circle.
就我们做戏剧的现在是机会特别多，现在是北京、上海，戏剧好像还挺丰富的。但是呢，实际上真正的就是属于能够表达这个我们的个人的感受和表达我们对社会生活的这个感受的这种真正的意义上的这种当代作品不多，很少，或者说。
Now there are a lot more opportunities for theater. For example, in Beijing, in Shanghai, really you get a large variety. Many things get put up. Production gets put up, but the real contemporary work that, in the real sense, that can express your personal feelings or your feelings about your life in this society is really very few.
我的感觉和建议和我的做法，就是要让中国既然都已经很混乱，那我觉得还不如再乱一点儿。那么就是整个中国的戏剧应该有各种各样多元的，不同的状态的，不同的方法，不同的流派，不同都乱在一起之后，慢慢的一些属于当代的、真正属于这个时代的这个作品，会经过时间的考验，一点一点会浮现出来。那个时候，我们再总结这个中国当代作品、这个戏剧作品的时候，我们可能会看得更清楚一点。
My personal feeling, my suggestion, my approach are that now that China is already very chaotic in the drama scene, why don't we make a bigger myth out of it? Because only through the diverse approaches and different schools and everything in the market, we have something to work with. We can slowly sort it out, and eventually something of value will emerge, and there will be something we can talk about.
Okay. I think.
Wait. I have a comment on that. I don't think a unified narrative is anything desirable to most artists. In China, there was a period where you could find unified narrative. That's the Cultural Revolution, model operas. To me, it's not chaotic enough. The problem is there are not enough substantial themes. Most of the productions or artworks don't have substantial themes. Some only play with styles, some only catering to commercial buyers or audience members. The problem is, well, there is one unified narrative that's government-sponsored, so-called 主旋律, the main melody. The good thing is around around the 主旋律 the main melody works, there are many different types. What's missing is those non-main melody works lack of substantial themes, which are often not allowed. So look at the surface, it's chaotic. I agree with Meng Jinghui, but if you look at the themes, today's theater is not really chaotic enough. In terms of number, compared to New York, Los Angeles, the theater scenes are so much smaller, so much smaller. We need to have a lot more. We should forever say goodbye to unified narratives. We should have many different types of narratives, but never unified again.
Now we impose on it retroactively in the sense of like things that happened in the 80s, for example, seem to build on one another in an important, significant way. And then suddenly, when things open up and there's more capital involved, lots of different things kind of happen, and it becomes, you know, I'm not talking about the specific works having to reflect certain themes, rather than how do you kind of make meaning of kind of everything that happens on its own. So, but it's a good question. Yeah.
Okay. You all talked about the current situation in which you are right now, still exploring different forms and styles, and then also you talked about the some of the influences that came earlier, like Danielewski and symbolism, social realism, etc. I'm wondering if you all, if possible, talk a little bit more about your own intellectual as well as artistic genealogical roots that have influenced your work today. I mean, in addition to those that you have mentioned.
我们的根源就是因为我们是和西方现代派奶长大的一群年轻人，但是我们又本身自己就生活在中国，所以我们有很多矛盾，有很多奇奇怪怪的想法想要表达，但是我们在好多时候又表达不出来。在这种表达不出来的状态下，我们有的时候憋着自己，有的时候又释放自己，可能在这个中间来来回回的，就是来举手发言，来创作自己的作品。
Talking about roots, I think we are just some babies who grew up on the baby formula of Western modernism, but also grew up on the local scene. And because of this, we have a lot of conflicts, internal conflicts and contradictions. And sometimes we can express it ourselves, otherwise, some other times we cannot really get it out. So sometimes we choose to release what we have, other times we hold it. So we're in this constant struggle of this conflict.
我跟孟京辉跟其他的来那个讲演的这个艺术家有一个不同，就是我们是土生土长的北京人，其实没有过任何在国外生活或者留学的经历。我们最长在美国待过3个月，是参加一个国际写作计划。就是我的英语到现在也只能是一个要咖啡和问厕所在哪儿的程度。
What's different about me is it's different. I'm really a local Beijinger, born and raised in Beijing, with no overseas experience or overseas education background. The longest I stayed in the U.S. was 3 months when I was in this writer's workshop. And my English is as good as asking for coffee or finding where the bathroom is.
然后从年龄上来说呢，我们应该说是 89的那一代，就是89年的时候呢，我们就是不大不小，都在大学，就是那个89的一切呢是在我们身上发生的，就是他们是留在我们身体里的，而不是我们用来思考的。
Age-wise, I think we're more or less the June 4th generation, neither too big nor too small. That was in our university years. So I think the June 4th incidence was more in our body than in our brains.
就是所以就是表达的时候呢，我们可能是有一个曲折性。
So in terms of how we express ourselves, I think there would be some twists and turns in how we
其
do
实
that.
没有那个，就是跟其他的那些艺术家，因为我今天我在这听了几天，跟他们的表达方式是有一点不同之处的。
Yeah. I've been sitting around in here for a few days. I think that's what makes us a little different from the artists you heard earlier.
那个我想问我想问那个廖一梅一个问题 ，and I'll ask my question in Chinese first。就是您刚才讲，在您的那个作品《琥珀》里面有一句台词，就是大众审美是一堆臭狗屎，然后您说这个一直是您创作的态度，所以我就想请问您，就是您对大众审美是一种什么定义？那您自己的作品是否被大众审美有所影响？因为刚才那个孙老师也有提到，就是你们现在和上海政府有这样的合约，那我就想问问你们，就是你们的作品会不会越来越大众化？So my questions are for Liao Yimei. Earlier she mentioned in the play Amber there's a line that popular aesthetics are bullshit. I'm basically asking for a clarification on what she means by that, what she means by popular aesthetics, and whether her own work is influenced by popular aesthetics, and because Sun Laoshi mentioned earlier that they are working with the Shanghai government to create this theater. And my last question is whether they think their work will become more and more popular. 谢谢。
我的创作的一个本质的出发点，或者说我的一个根本基础呢，是我对这个人间的准则，或者人类发明的种种文明怀有极大的不信任感。如果你问我对大众审美的这个，你就是把我纳入了就是通常的这个谈论的体系。我一直是站在外面看的。他们是你先。
The basic principle I work with is I work with the skepticism I have with the common way of thinking or the common system of discussion.
我觉得能不能被接受，以及接受到什么程度，然后也就是说，一个艺术家能否在就他活着的时候取得成功，其实是一个来源于他的运气。每个人都想成为毕加索，而不想成为梵高，但这个不是艺术家自己能决定的，所以我不考虑这个问题。
Whether someone is accepted by the masses, and to what degree this is accepted, whether we will live to see the day of our success, I don't think it's up to me, because everybody wants to be Picasso and not Van Gogh, but I don't think it's up for us to decide. It really, a lot of that depends on luck.
I think there's a question.
我用中文讲，然后请张老师帮我翻译一下吧。口气说完，我自己也喜欢看话剧，然后我注意到昨天廖一梅对于那个话剧的介绍是说，就是在之前中国的话剧一直是就是更多的是充当一种宣传的工具，然后今天孟京辉也谈到，就是从49年到80年代之前，中国的话剧一直是苏联模式的，但是我觉得你们 为什么没有谈另外一条话剧发展线路？其实中国的话剧，它的根源、它的起源就是一种小剧场的实验形式的话剧。中国的戏剧最开始就是话剧是叫做文明戏，后来这种文明戏就没落了。它的那个就是重新的振兴是由一群在学院里的教授和学生们去那个就是进行创新，然后这个时候它才被称作是话剧。所以当时他们这个运动是叫做 amateur， 就是爱美剧，就是一种业余的小剧场性质的，就是那种。他们当时也是觉得是很先锋的，把以一种启蒙的精神态度来做这种话剧，所以我觉得这种小剧场现在的小剧场话剧有一点像是它的一个重新的回归。然后我在想，我现在看这些话剧，就是他们更多的是在表达一种有点像白领的生活，然后并不是很能够打动人心，就是没有触及到那种很深刻的地方，一种很夸张过度的歇斯底里的表达。所以刚才刘索拉也提到说那个多余的感情，然后我想这种林育人的形象，他在中国最早是郁达夫，他的作品就是一种林育人的形象，也是有一点像现在这种自说自话表达自己的感情，但是他那个背后是有一种深刻的家国之痛的，所以在当时会引起那么大的一种反响。就是能够直击人的心灵。刚才孟京辉说你们的话剧是你们往哪一个方向走，中国的话剧就会往哪一个方向走，所以我很希望看到就是这个中国的话剧能够往一种这样的方向。不知道。
I'll make it brief. Just now, I heard your introduction about last night. I heard your as we watched the play. Yimei was saying before this, theater was mainly used as propaganda, and also Meng Jinghui mentioned that for almost 50 years they followed the Russian model. But I think we still need to look at the root of Chinese drama, starting with the small theater, which is called the civilized drama or the Wenmingxi. Then it went down, and some professors, academic people revived it at the amateur theater. So currently, the theater, I see a lot of the white-collar life, and it's not very touching or very profound. It's just a lot of hysteria. And I think this kind of people, as Liu Sola mentioned, and it also has its historical roots as well. So I think if Meng Jinghui mentioned that Chinese drama will go in the direction we want it to, I really hope it will go in the right direction.
这个问题你是想问孟京辉还是想问我？我没有什么好说的。
我觉得是这样，我觉得中国戏剧吧，往哪边发展，就是说，可能我们现在目的最重要的是先要知道自己下边有多少能力。我们有很多能力，我们可以做各种不同的戏剧。在这种不同戏剧的这个状态下呢，让观众去选择，他们没得选择。我觉得最重要的是创作者要表达的东西。就是我创作者要做的东西，我觉得这最重要，不能理睬他们。如果他们要喜欢吃狗屎，就让他们继续吃狗屎，我也可以制作一些狗屎，没关系。但是我觉得最重要的是艺术家的自我表达，这个自我表达是高于一切的，比他们的想象，比他们对艺术家的想象，比观众为艺术家设计的好多这种模式，我觉得都重要。重要的是艺术家的自我表达。
Which way the Chinese drama will take, which direction, I think that has a lot to do with our capacity as theater people. And I do believe that we have a lot of energy to create very different kinds of artwork. And of course, we create to express ourselves. So if the audience want to look at their bullshit, that's fine. But the more important thing for the artist is self-expression. That is more important than what we imagine the audience deems important, or than catering to the taste of the audience.
我觉得我好像还是有一个困惑，因为在我看来，就是剧场或者影院，它其实永远都是一个共谋的场所，就是台上在演，台下在看，或者说台上台下在一起演。如果说就是说，像您说的那样，创作者和欣赏者之间永远是一个误读的关系，那我就是说，我的困惑在于，这种共谋它是怎么发生的？或者说更简单一点的来讲的话，你们的作品里面是有一种什么样的东西在吸引着一群臭狗屎来看
There's still something I'm puzzled about, because as I understand it, theater is always a kind of conspiracy on and off stage. So as a creator, and how do you deal with the misreading, and how do you make sure your work is really attracting people that you may believe to be interested in basically bullshit?
就是中国的好多，就是有各种各样的戏剧，有我们做的一些戏，还有一些戏，就你不知道，可能你没看过一些，那好多人做的那个戏剧，真太难看了，就难看到就是它会影响到你的睡觉，影响到你吃饭。那我们的戏剧呢，不会影响到你这，我们只会影响到你的灵魂。
I think there's a lot of theater out there in China, all kinds of plays going on that you may not have seen, and they are really very hard to watch because they affect your appetite and affect your sleeping patterns. But what we do, it only works on your souls.
我觉得中国戏剧还是缺一种，就是强烈的个人表达。我们看到的东西都是统一的、规格化的，在电视剧里，在新闻被控制的新闻报道里的那种思想，在剧场里太多了，所以我们是对这个的一种反动。
I think there's a lot missing in terms of self-expression in the Chinese theater. What we see instead is a lot of the unified cookie cutter kind of expression or lack of expression that have grown out of the TV dramas, the news broadcasts, and also the censorship. What is really missing is this self-expression. So we're basically going against this trend.
I want to follow up on a little bit on Jinghui, but the question will take us back to something that William Sun was saying, which is this question of spectacle, right? Which I think is important. And spectacle, why this tendency towards spectacle? Partly because a lot of themes and ideas are in fact censored. I mean, you can't have a theater of ideas because a lot of these are censored. So hence the movement towards spectacle, which makes, of course, spectacle itself something a little bit suspicious. And this, I think, leads to the comment I want to make, because I think William was also suggesting or implying a little bit that that he liked Yimei and Meng Jinghui's early plays because they were non-spectacular. So plays like Two Dogs. And I think he was voicing a slight suspicion about the later plays, which make use to a certain extent of spectacle, and whether that use of spectacle made them complicit with the government and with China and so on. Now, what I want to put forward is another possibility, that I think it's true that Meng Jinghui and Yimei are moving towards spectacle in the recent world, as we saw, right? But it's spectacle perhaps in a different sense. It's not the state spectacle, it's a spectacle, for example, of youth culture. It's a spectacle of fashion. It's a spectacle of the changing look, if you like, of China now. And the fact that, they're both, I mean, earlier they said that the work is actually very slippery, that one reason why they get through censorship is that the government doesn't really know what they're doing. And I think it's also true of the way they use spectacle. So what I want to propose is something like this, that what you're seeing here in front of you are two mutants, basically. I mean, you know this word mutant, right? I mean, these are mutants. They are a strange new breed. I mean, they are not just fed on the milk of modernism, as Meng Jinghui said. I mean, something has happened to this milk. I mean, they're growing up in this sort of rather strange form, which, of course, I mean, this is not entirely fanciful. I think this whole idea of a kind of mutant moment of culture and the way in which you have a kind of transforming China might be one way of bringing back together the issue of spectacle, which I think William Sun really put before us in a very important way, and maybe how that can be used to look at the work of Meng Jinghui and Yimei.
这个花多少钱制作不是一个政府标准，比如说，刚才那个孙教授说的这个，比如说政府要花很多钱置景，他们制出来的景就是都像每年的春节联欢会，金碧辉煌，是用来歌舞升平的。琥珀花了很多钱制作，其中第一场景就花了很多钱制作了一面肮脏的，然后那个布满了空调发热器的散热器的一整面墙，这也同样花了很多的钱。
Money is really not the only way to measure the stage design or sets, because in a lot of the government productions, they spend a lot of money putting together something like the Spring Festival CCTV big party. If anybody has seen it on TV, it's very fancy. It's used to praise the so-called good life. But for Amber, we also spent a lot of money, but in the first scene, it was very costly because we put together a dirty wall with a lot of air conditioners. It was also very expensive.
趣味是本质的差别。
The essential difference is taste.
Okay, go ahead.
我有个问题是关于现在你们在北京风潮这个话剧院的这个问题，就是其实我们刚才说了很多这种军事化管理啊，就是演员和戏曲这些培训的这些背景。那你们现在在培训新的演员吗？就是说他们有没有能力，就是说，跳出这个军事化管理或者这种机制，就是被政府或者被一种传统控制着的这种教育，就是演员的教育。我就很好奇，你们是不是现在也在培养一些新的演员，就是跳出这一个框架来想戏剧是什么，然后演绎你们在说的事情。因为我觉得观众其实也是一种演员，那他只是不出声，或者他可以笑可以哭什么的，但是你们台上的演员是现在你发现现在是不是市场的一些问题，就是说缺少演员，还是演员的那个年纪段还是很年轻，有没有想这些问题？ So I'll translate my question. just briefly. So I'm actually curious about the theater production in Beijing. If there's some involvement in training new actors, because this kind of military institutionalized training of actors and theater directors in China is a given. You know, sort of just don't think about it. So is there a new way to train actors these days? Are you working directly with this kind of training to ask actors to jump out of this framework and rethink about theater?
我们也训练我们的演员，我们的演员都是，他们也都是经过传统的戏剧我说的传统就是戏剧学院的一些毕业生，他们这些演员，但是在我们的新戏演出之前，我们都会跟这些演员有新的、不同的一些训练方法，然后呢，我们差不多，我们蜂巢剧场，它主要还是以一个剧场为主的，它不是以演员啊和签约啊这些东西为主，它是剧场，主要还是剧场来演出各种各样不同的戏剧。
We do train our actors who are mostly academy graduates. And each time we produce a new play, we use our training methodology, which is somewhat different from their academy trainings. And as for the Beehive Theater House, it is not as much a training center as a place where we put up our latest productions.
Well, I have a comment on that question. When you say military training of actors, I suspect you were referring to the training of Chinese opera actors. Meng Jinghui mentioned theater academies, Stanislavski, that wouldn't be seen as military training. In fact, today's session is about theater. While the majority of Chinese theatrical scenes are missing, because in China there are two major types of theater, and modern drama, spoken drama, 话剧, makes up only a small portion. We haven't touched upon Chinese opera yet. Even the government is ignoring the majority of theater performances, which are grassroots in the villages. The government does not design them, does not subsidize them, and does not even pay attention to them. In fact, in today's China, large majority of theater performances are happening by those self-made, itinerant performers in the villages. So this is a completely different topic. I just want you to know that we are only discussing a very small part of Chinese theater today.
我想问孟导，就是您最近排的《空中花园谋杀案》是个音乐剧，是您基于对语言的越来越不信任，尝试了别的形式，还是就是现在因为跨界的艺术合作是个流行？因为好像在上海商城的空中花园演出之前，您说过还下一步想排那个木偶剧来着。
My question is about the musical you put up, The Murder in the Air Garden. Is it due to a distrust with language? Because in the Shanghai, the next show, you said you intend to put up a puppet show. Would that be your consideration?
对，就我们什么都想做，比如我们现在想做一个我以前在一个体育馆做过儿童剧。那我还想做那个就是木偶剧，还有木偶的大型的木偶剧，或者游行，就是那种比如说在广场上做的戏剧，我们都有一些计划。我觉得可能各种各样的东西，我们都想玩一玩，尝试一下。为什么？就是因为现在就是中国戏剧的这种状态也太少了。 我们想用我们的这种创作能做得更丰富一点儿。
Basically, we want to do everything. We have attempted to do children's play in a stadium. We want to try to put some silent shows like mimes or puppet theaters or even parades in the open space. Why do we want to do that? Because the Chinese theater really lacks variety, and we want to make a difference.
我们去年做了一个戏，用一个大玻璃把观众和演员隔开了，在一个剧场里边，就在蜂巢剧场，用一个整个玻璃，然后所有的观众要想看戏的话，就要戴耳机，然后才能听见舞台里边的这个声音。我觉得那是一次特别好玩的一次实践。
Last year, we did something interesting in the Beehive. We completely separated the audience and the actors with a giant piece of glass. So if the audience want to hear what's going on stage, they have to put on earphones, and it was really a lot of fun.
我们想明年再做一个观众比演员还少的一个戏剧。我们想用100多个演员，但是只要50个观众。像这样的话，我们想弄一个让所有的演员就彻底的把观众给弄乱了、弄懵了的这样一个戏剧。
Next year, I want to try something that's different. We want to do a show where the actors outnumber the audience, so the audience will be overwhelmed by actors in the real sense.
我觉得这个戏可能就是卡夫卡的某个戏，就我觉得，但是还没最后定，但是就有了这个想法了。
这个戏在静安区政府就不要你来了。
也不一定，他们可能希望这样。
It may well be some Kafka show, and Dr. Sun was saying, well, maybe the Shanghai government doesn't want to be here, so we don't know.
对。
My question is about if you could comment on difference or similarities between independent avant-garde theater and cinema, especially in particular regarding and maybe Ning Ying can say interesting things as well, in particular in relation to the success of Chinese cinema in festivals, the awards, the presence of foreign production, foreign capital in Chinese cinema, versus a theater that, because of its conditions of a more difficult portability and translatability, it sounds something more vernacular that remains within China. And I think that this is important because we're talking about, Sun Laoshi is talking, well, we're discussing how the government and kind of the control on topics, but there are other forces that frame the contents or can frame contents, being market success, or in the case of cinema, international kind of reception. And I've seen, I know that Meng Jinghui is also doing videos. I've seen Xigua, watermelon.
Yeah, 3分钟的 3 minutes 电影。
So I was wondering if he can find some way of expressing something in the video or cinema and different than theater.
就是我觉得中国这个就是所谓的第6代电影跟中国的这个戏剧，我觉得中间一个最重要的区别就是戏剧没有审查，电影审查的太厉害了。
One major difference between sixth generation film directors in China and Chinese modern drama is there's no censorship for drama, but very heavy censorship for film.
我其实首先是一个电影编剧。我在写话剧之前的很多年都是在写电影，那我实在不堪折磨了。我就是忍受了好多年各种各样的折磨，在电影开拍的时候突然被停拍，然后以及长期的时间很长的这个修改过程什么的，我后来觉得戏剧是一个更简洁然后更方便的表达。这2年我也更多都是写戏剧。
I started out interestingly as a film script writer, but I was tortured for years. Sometimes it's right before the shooting we were asked to stop, and sometimes I had to spend long times rewriting, and I just couldn't stand this torture anymore. So I found something that's simpler and more straightforward, which is drama.
I want to briefly follow up on Akbar's remarks on spectacles and link spectacles and specters, because I saw something of a haunting quality in some of the clips we saw, but also the play we have read. Akbar said we are in the presence of 2 mutants, and he talked about the changing look in youth culture. But I want to carry it also to something that really struck me in in one of the clips and in the play, namely not only the changing look but the changing body, and something we could call the medical imaginary. I mean, the heart transplant and the face transplant as new medical interventions that in a way redesign the body. And I wonder if Yimei could perhaps comment a little more on her preoccupation with this medical imaginary. In the conversation we had, I said I'm tempted to read this as a neo-Cartesian meditation on the mind-body split. Because there's incredibly interesting implications regarding the fashioning of subjectivity, the self-fashioning and the fashioning of bodies, and the relationship between the two.
其实这个都首先源于对自己的困惑，对人的困惑。
I think the essence of this start from the puzzlement, the perplexity about oneself and about people.
从本质上说，人是被迫接受自己的。他生下来以后，就是确定自己是谁的一个过程。他得跟别人比较，才知道自己是聪明还是美貌还是丑，还是那个敏捷还是笨。就这些东西是通过跟别人的比较产生的。其实它是一个被动接受自己是一个什么人的过程。
I think from the moment one is born, the person is forced to accept oneself by asking the question, who am I? Because only by comparison with others you can figure out if you're smarter than other people, if you're prettier, if you're clumsier, or so it's all by comparison with others.
但是否认同这个你的自己这件事儿，其实对人可能是一辈子的一件事儿。
But whether you can identify with yourself, it's often a lifelong process.
就所有人都说我很瘦，但是我从来没有这种自我感觉。
For example, everybody say I'm skinny, but I never felt that way.
我老觉得我是一个特别有劲儿的人，然后我会做出 要跟别人打架，或者是那样的一个冲动的表现，他们都觉得很奇怪。但是对我是我感觉不到我身体的这个瘦弱。
Because I always feel myself to be very strong and powerful and ready to fight, but obviously that's not my impression on others.
就我觉得可能每个人都有这一类的错位的困惑，然后你会很奇怪。自己是一个被动接受的身体，然后要适应它，然后还要爱这个身体，实际上确实是一个很难，要一辈子的一个课题。
So every day you're working with this disorientation of your self-image of your and your body, and it's something you have to adapt to and love, and it's often a lifelong process.
而且呢，就是你这个身体中还会产生对别人的爱，它会来源于什么？然后你是否信任别人，就是对你的那个爱意？这个都是就是在琥珀里面我最初想到的人的这些困惑。
And on top of that, you have to deal with your love for others coming from your own this body of yours, and trying to figure out if you can accept or trust this love from others coming in your direction. So there's really a lot you have to work with.
我觉得我可能有必要看心理医生，但是我的写作可能就是我的自我治疗，所以到现在还是基本健康的。
I think having said so much, I may need a psychologist, but before that, I'm using writing as a self-healing process.
I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the videos we watched last night. I mean, I know there's a long history of like filmed opera and opera films and stuff. So I mean, are these just promotional items, or I mean, who's filming these? Are they distributed? Is this part of kind of a filmed theater scene in which there's a lot of these types of films circulating and so forth? I'd just like to hear you talk a little bit more about these films.
Amber.
Are you talking about Amber, the beginning one, or?
I mean, any of them. Amber maybe had the highest production value of the three that we looked at, but I mean.
You're talking about these videos. They are on the market, or?
Yeah, and I mean, who's involved? Like, I mean, how is this just literally setting up a camera in front of a stage? Or I mean, are you bringing in film directors to work these out in elaborate ways? And how are they distributed? And yeah, I mean, how do they fit in relationship to like a long history, I think, of filmed theater in China?
因为这些戏它不怎么演出了，最近所以以前的，所以就出了这个 DVD， 然后就是正常渠道在卖，我们剧场也卖，书店也有卖。
These are just the productions. A lot of them we're not doing them anymore, so these are for sale in our theater and also circulate. It's on the market.
So maybe we can buy some later on. Some people might want to buy some.
最好的要想买这个最好的办法就是看戏，看完戏以后再买。最好。
It's better you watch our plays first and then buy it.
Okay, so yes. Go ahead.
It seems like in a lot of the productions you've talked about, you either disregard your audience when you're making your production, or perhaps you're playing with your audience, and it seems like it's more a separation in terms of who's on the stage and who's in the audience. I was wondering what you thought about theater that kind of goes in the opposite direction in terms of breaking the fourth wall. I'm thinking, I guess, of perhaps Boal's Theater of the Oppressed, where they invite audience members to come up onto the stage and actually become actors in productions such as those.
这都是一些形式的变化，我们都做过很多尝试，我觉得这些都挺好玩的。我们以后还会做各种各样这样的喜剧，比如说打破第四堵墙， 就30年前就开始打破了，80年代就开始打破了。那像跟观众的互动，像两只狗的生活意见里面互动的都已经有点过分了，所以呢，就是我对这些的看法就是，戏剧就是得要好玩儿，大家一起在这个戏剧里边有了剧以后呢，因为戏剧不光是有剧，它还有一个场。剧和场合在一起就是剧场，这个才成为一个剧场的一个基本氛围，也就是一个大家共同的一种，也可以说是一种共谋关系，共同的快感，是一种有点是像在一个公共场所说一些奇怪的事情，这么一个概念。
What you just mentioned, I think these are all different things in terms of forms or style, and I think they're a lot of fun because the fourth wall has been broken down about 30 years ago, and in the Two Dogs, I think we're really overdoing the audience participation. It was we pushed it to an extreme, but all these, I think the essence is to have fun. Because for drama, we say 剧场, one part is 剧, which is the play, and 场, which is the theater, which is a public place with an atmosphere where the collaboration or conspiracy takes place, and you talk about funny things or strange things in this public place.
Last comment, David.
Thank you. I want to make a few comments to draw what has been said over here. This is less a question than comments. To the sort of dominant theme of poor theory. I just want to begin with what I think was a funny slip. When William Sun was talking, I was typing away. And he mentioned Broadway and the West End, and I wrote Broadway and Wet End. Right? So that might be indicative of the kind of theatre that is produced in such places. That said, I just want to try and draw out some of the themes that are relevant to poor theory that have been circulated in this terrifically rich discussion and conversation here, for which I thank you. So I'm just going to sort of point to themes to try and bring them together, to think a bit more crisply about poor theory, which is sort of woven in and out of the last few days. So the first early on was mentioned twists in space and time. I think Akbar sort of brought it up, but twists in thinking. I mean, how to identify or reveal the turns and twists in thinking as a way of thinking about the nuance and subtlety of theorizing. The second, which has come up repeatedly, is a theme of farce, satire, humor as a critical mode, right? I mean, how one engages farce, satire, and humor as a critical disposition. And indeed, as we've seen it portrayed both in the exemplifications of theatre here, but also in the discussion, as a mode of revelation, of surprise, right? You think of Beckett as sometimes very, very funny, for example, and that becomes a mode of revealing something that you didn't quite think was there, or was there and wasn't quite focused on, and so on. So this becomes a way of theorizing. I mean, in the academy we have perhaps too little of it, right? But it's to draw attention to it. The third element is taking up the local. I mean, there was talk about playwriting from the local, in the local vernacular, and so on. But it didn't stop there, right? It wasn't just, I mean, if it were just local, it would be of interest only to those who are local or those who are interested in that locality. It's a focus on the local in order to reveal something generalizable from the local, right? So it's that play between the local and its generalizability. Just let me scroll down to, And then sort of in the latter part of the discussion, this question of versatility, of no fixed style, right, creates a possibility of evasions, the possibility of evading censorship, where censorship is both imposed thought, but could also be a censorship that comes with hegemony, a closing down, a silencing. And that versatility, I think, is very important, actually. And I'm glad you brought it up, right? It is extremely important, both as style, but also as methodology, you might say, right? You know, you think in the academy or sort of in theorizing generally that we become bounded by some or other hegemonic style. I mean, deconstruction is the most obvious case in point, but there are lots of others. And while that might open up some things, right, invariably it ends up being a forced closure on other things. And so versatility, I think, is quite important. The other element, I think, is a distrust of language that was suggested so productively. You know, where distrust of language itself becomes not a closed sort of hegemonic method, but a you know, almost inherent disposition. Whatever the language is, one distrusts it, including the theoretical language, right? So one's constantly pushing to open up what language closes down. And that, I mean, that disposition of distrust, right? A disposition, a kind of almost a negative critique or negative dialectic, I think is interesting. And then this notion of mutant culture, I think, could be engaged quite productively. Maybe we should all become mutants, but maybe it becomes uninteresting at that point, right? And finally, I just, two quick things, well, one less quick. It struck me that when William was talking about a theater of design, he, of course, is talking about a kind of theater, but we might equally think of it as a reflection on design itself, right? Where design itself is a theater and assumes certain conditions, dimensions, dispositions, ways of modes of expression, and a theater of design might be something we want to evade as a kind of you know, the sort of poor design kind of modality that we have in mind here. And then finally, I just want to make a plea on a variety of registers, which I think has been revealed in some way from the discussion, for patience, persistence, and perseverance, right? In our being in the world, but also in our theorizing about that being in the world. Letting the circumstances speak to one and then molding them to a kind of critical end rather than forcing the issue. I can give all kinds of examples from the last few days, but you know, maybe the most obvious one would be the contrast yesterday between Chen Danqing on the one hand, who was much more nuanced than Ai Weiwei on the other, right? But I mean, I think you can see it among ourselves as well. So I want to thank you for persisting, persevering, and being patient.
Okay, that was a great summary, and maybe we should leave it at that, and we can have comments later on. All right, so remains to thank the panel for.